Steinway advertises that their concert grand piano contains over 12,000 parts. Now that's advertising, and we know that that can always be exaggerated. And even as a piano technician, that seems like a lot of parts to me. So I wondered, how many parts are in a Baldwin Hamilton? There's only one way to find out. I disassembled this Baldwin Hamilton as much as possible. And now I'm going to count the parts and come up with at least a pretty good estimate of how many there are. First of all, we have to appreciate just how many small parts make up some of the piano assemblies. Here we have your typical whipping, which is in each note of a piano. Now I've broken that apart into its individual components and counted 18 components, 18 parts total, all except one of which can be found in every note of the piano. The remaining part is only present in the whippings that operate dampers. And since not every note in a piano has a damper, there's not 88 of them, just 67, because 67 of the notes in this Baldwin Hamilton model have a damper. Now we take that 17 pieces times 88 and 1 times 67, and we're at 1,563 parts. So far, we're doing pretty good. Here's the damper assembly. I broke that down into 16 different parts. Now, like I said, only 67 notes have dampers, so we have 67 dampers, 1,072 parts. Hammer assembly. This I broke it down into 22 different parts. We take that by 88. That's 1,936 parts. Those are the majority of the moving parts. We also have the action rails that all these parts are attached to, and that gives us some additional parts. There's the let-off rail, a spring rail. There's 4 parts on each note. 4 times 88 for those pieces, plus some additional parts. Came up with another 404 parts. Moving along to the soundboard. At first glance, this looks like just a few parts, but if you come in here closer, you can see that we have all these bridge pins, 444 in all. What looks like an individual block of wood on a Baldwin pin block. Each one of those black marks indicates a lamination in this pin block. So Baldwin advertises a 26-ply pin block. I have 26 black marks indicating that. Add the ribs, the back post, the handles, and now we have 488 more parts. Now coming down to the hardware, these are screws that connect the case parts together. I've got the tuning pins, various springs, the pedals, the casters. Together I totaled 564 parts. We have more case parts, the bottom board. Now we've got the plate. Again, on first glance, this plate looks as if it might contain just a few parts. But as we get in closer, we can see the hitch pins are individual pins that are driven into this plate. There's 137 of them. Up here in the base section, There's upper termination pins. Again, they're individual pins that are driven into the plate. And then if you look at these holes, each one of them has a bushing insert made of wood. There's 224 bushing inserts. In all, this plate has at least 430 parts. Now on that plate, we put the strings. The strings come to a total of 50 bass strings and 87 treble wire strings. Now the treble wire strings, as you can see, not quite as many as you might think, because they wrap around the hitch pin, making 2 strings for 1 wire. So in this case, there's not as many parts as you might think. Moving on to the keys. Each of the white keys has 9 different components that make up the key. 9 times 52 is 468. So the number of white keys is the same as the number of the cards in a deck of cards, 52. The black keys, there's 8 components to each of the 36 black keys for a total of 288 parts. Grand total of 756 parts. Now that only leaves us with the case parts, the outer cabinet that encloses the piano. Now this piece here, this is not a case part, this is the key bed, but this is a good piece to look at when you're trying to determine the parts, because this one's exposed. It's one plank. It has actually 20 different pieces of wood that I counted that are glued together. So much more than you might think at first glance. When you come down here and look at the case parts, each one of these pieces has more than just one plank on it. This, for example, you see the strip here that holds the music. We have a couple pieces of wood in the back, strip of felt. Also, it's all veneered, so this piece here is one piece of veneer. Also, the side has veneer on it. So any one of these parts could probably contain up to at least 10 components that make up the part. So adding them all together, once we added up starting with the action parts, the total is close to 5,000. Here we have about 1,000 more, and then another 1,300. What I came up with was roughly 7,350 before the case parts were added. Adding the case parts brings the total close to 7,500. Now, I'm sure I've missed something. The one thing I know I've missed that I haven't counted, and if we're trying to get up maybe to closer to around 8,000, we could keep looking. I'm sure we could get closer to that 8,000 mark. For example, I noticed the barbells in these casters. I counted about 20 of them. 20 times 4 is 80. What am I missing? I'm sure it's something. But just to conclude, I have 7,500, probably no more than 8,000 parts in this Baldwin Hamilton. So does a Steinway Concert D have 12,000 parts? I have to say it probably does, given the fact that Grands have a more complicated action, they have more action parts, and since this is where we got most of the number of parts was in the action, so I'm assuming the Grand action, you might add easily maybe 2,000 more parts just in the action alone. So then we have more complicated woodwork, more beams, structural beams, and more veneers on the case parts. This number of strings would be about the same. Number of plate hitch pins and tuning pins, and that would be about the same. But I don't have the opportunity to take a 9-foot Steinway apart right now, but I would say that I am more of a believer in that advertisement than I was before this project.